The exiles in the void was endless, cold, and merciless. A broken fleet drifted through the darkness, their ships cracked and scarred, engines flickered like dying stars, power fading with every passing hour. They were not warriors anymore, not explorers, not even citizens of the galaxy. They were outcasts, banished, forgotten, cursed by their own people. The exile fleet had once been proud, their banners bright across the stars. But now those banners were torn rags, hanging from shattered hulls inside the ships. Hunger spread like fire, rations long gone. Children cried, their thin voices echoing in the hollow corridors. Mothers whispered lies of hope, while fathers watched in silence. Every eye looked at the black sky and saw no mercy. The galaxy had cast them out. The Council had declared them unworthy. Planets shut their gates, stations turned off their lights. They were told to leave, to vanish, to die where no one could see. They had begged for a world, for a small piece of land, but every answer was the same. Not here, not with us. Their leader, Captain Ryan, stood on the bridge of the flagship. His uniform was torn, his face thin from hunger. He had once commanded thousands with pride. Now he commanded the dying. He whispered to himself, "How much longer can we last?" But no answer came from the silence outside. One last signal pulsed from their fleet. It was weak, barely held together by failing machines, a message that had been sent hundreds of times before. Please, to anyone who hears, we need shelter, we need water, we need food, we are dying. Every time the signal went out, only silence came back. The galaxy had closed its ears. No one wanted the cursed. No one wanted the broken. Inside the refugee decks, the fear grew heavier. Young ones asked, "Why does no one answer?" Old ones said, "Because we are already dead." The air recycling hummed, weak and stale. Lights flickered. Shadows danced on metal walls. It felt like waiting inside a coffin that stretched across the stars. And then, something changed. On the flagship's console, a new light blinked. It was soft, almost impossible to notice. The comms officer gasped and shouted, "Captain, we have an answer." Every head turned, every heart beat faster. Rion ran to the console, his hands shaking. "Play it," he ordered. The voice came through. It was not cold, not cruel, not the voice of the Council. It was human, warm, and steady. "This is Earth Command. We have received your signal." The words froze the crew. For a moment, no one breathed. "Say it again," Rion whispered. The officer replayed it. "This is Earth Command, we hear you." Tears fell on the bridge. Some covered their mouths, others fell to their knees. For months they had been ignored, rejected, spit upon by the galaxy. But here, from a small world they had barely thought of, came an answer. Hope lit their faces for the first time in years, but fear also rose. Why would humans answer when no one else would? One elder asked, "What if it is a trap?" Another whispered. Rion looked at the stars and asked himself the same question. Humans were young, unpredictable, dangerous. The galaxy called them reckless, called them violent, but they had also called them stubborn, and stubbornness was what the exiles needed most. The signal continued. "Your fleet is damaged, we see. Your position, we are preparing aid." Simple words, but they struck harder than any weapon. The exiles could not believe it. After being cast away by every world, after being left to rot in silence, it was humanity that opened its hand. In the lower decks, people began to whisper, "Humans will save us." But others shook their heads. No one saves for free. Fear mixed with hope. They had no choice but to wait. On the bridge, Rion gave his order. "Prepare the fleet, align with Earth signal. We will see if this is mercy or betrayal." The broken engines turned, groaning like dying beasts. The ships began to crawl toward the blue planet in the distance. Every eye looked at that small light in the void, Earth, a world no one thought would answer. Now it was their only chance. The fleet limped forward. Silence filled the corridors. Children clutched their parents. Soldiers gripped their old weapons. No one spoke, for fear that hope itself would break. And in the dark, Captain Ryan whispered a promise. If the humans betray us, then we will die standing. But if they truly mean it, then maybe we have found a home. The void around them was still cold. The stars still burned with distant fire. But now, for the first time in years, the exiles felt warmth inside their hearts. And all of it came from a single voice, a human voice that said, "We hear you." The human answer. The exile fleet drifted closer to the pale blue world. Engines coughed smoke, hulls cracked and groaning as if every piece of metal wanted to give up. But still, they pushed forward because hope was pulling them now. A hope carried inside a voice, a human voice. The words had been simple but powerful. "We hear you." On the flagship's bridge, Captain Ryan could still not believe it. The galaxy had spat on them, closed its gates, even threatened them with death. Yet here was Earth, a planet that many had laughed at, a world seen as backward and reckless. And still it was Earth that answered. He turned to his officers, their faces pale and filled with fear. "We are going to trust them," he said. The crew exchanged glances. Some nodded, some frowned, but none dared to argue, because what other choice did they have? The comms crackled again. "This is Earth Command. We have detected damage to, your fleet. We are dispatching escort vessels now." The words sent shockwaves across the refugee decks. People whispered, prayed, or cried quietly. Some shouted in disbelief. "They are coming for us." Others muttered curses. No one helps. For free. Not even humans. Hope and fear burned together in every heart. Hours passed. And then they saw them. Tiny dots in the void at first, moving with speed and precision. As they drew closer, the exiles saw the unmistakable shape of human ships. Not massive dreadnoughts or carriers like the Council commanded, but lean, sharp escort ships with armored hulls that gleamed with cold light. The humans flew in perfect formation, engines burning steady blue. One of them moved forward and opened a channel. "This is the United Earthship Horizon. We are approaching your position," the human voice said. "This is Captain Ryan of the Exile Fleet," Ryan answered, his voice shaking despite himself. There was silence for a moment. Then the human spoke again. "Captain Ryan, you are not alone anymore." The bridge fell quiet. Those words cut. Deep. Deeper than any blade. The exiles had lived alone for so long that they had forgotten what it felt like to be seen. Not as monsters, not as cursed beings, but as people. Even Ryan's hardened officers lowered their heads, some wiping away tears. Yet still fear remained. Why would humans, of all species, offer them kindness? Was it pity, or a trap, or something else entirely? The horizon moved closer. Lights, shining on the broken hulls of the exile ships. Human medics and engineers were already preparing. "Prepare docking," the human voice said, calm and steady. Ryan gave the order. "Open the hatches, let them board." But even as he said it, his stomach twisted with fear. If the humans wished to destroy them, this would be the perfect moment. The docking clamps connected with a deep metallic groan. For a moment, silence filled the corridors of the exile ship. Every refugee stared at the airlock, waiting for it to open. Mothers pulled children close. Soldiers readied old rifles. Everyone held their breath. The doors hissed open, and humans stepped inside. They wore dark suits, marked with the crest of Earth. Helmets slid back, revealing tired but determined faces. One of them spoke, his voice echoing in the silence. "We are here to help." No one moved. The exiles had forgotten what trust felt like. One young child took a step forward, her eyes wide. She touched the gloved hand of the human standing nearest. The soldier froze, then gently crouched, offering her a ration pack. The child took it, holding it as if it were treasure. And for the first time, the exile ship filled with sound. Not of fear, not of hunger, but of sobs and laughter. The humans had brought food, medicine, and water. Things the galaxy had denied them for years. Captain Ryan watched in silence, his chest heavy with emotion. He had expected betrayal. He had prepared himself for it. But here he saw something else. Humanity. The very thing the galaxy had mocked and feared. Here it was, extending a hand to the Forsaken. Still, Ryan could not relax. He turned to the human officer and asked, Why help us when every other world turned away? The officer looked at him, his eyes steady. Because you asked, and no one else would answer. Simple words, yet they carried a weight stronger than fleets. Rian nodded slowly, not fully trusting, but no longer able to doubt either. As the aid spread through the exile fleet, rumors traveled quickly. They are saving us. They will betray us later. They are reckless. They will bring the Council's wrath on their own heads. But no one could deny what they had seen with their own eyes. The humans were not taking. They were giving. And that truth burned brighter than any fear. On the Horizon's bridge, Commander Ellis of Earth watched the exiles carefully. He knew the Council would hear of this soon. He knew Earth would be punished for this act of defiance. But he also knew there was no turning back. Prepare a course to Earth, he ordered. If the galaxy wants a fight, they'll have to go through us. Back on the exile flagship, Ryan stood by the window. He looked at the pale blue world shining in. The distance. A world that no one in the galaxy had ever cared much for. And yet this world had answered. This world had opened its doors, he whispered to himself. Maybe, just maybe, this is where we find our refuge. The void still stretched forever. The stars still burned with cold indifference. But now, the exiles were not alone. Human ships escorted them, guiding them forward. And for the first time, the future did not look like death. It looked like hope. It looked like Earth. Shadows of distrust. The exile fleet crawled behind the human escorts. For the first time in years, their ships were no longer drifting without direction. But inside their hearts, doubt gnawed like a silent predator. The humans had given food, water, and medicine. Yes, yet the galaxy had taught them one cruel lesson again and again. No kindness ever came without a price. On the refugee decks, voices clashed. Some whispered that humans were different. They gave us food without asking for anything, a mother said. Her child clutched the ration bar tightly, refusing to let go. But others hissed warnings in dark corners. Humans are cunning. They are warriors. They will use us as tools. Every gift carried a shadow, every smile a hidden knife, and so fear remained. Captain Ryan stood at the observation deck of his flagship. Through the cracked glass he could see Earth in the distance, a small blue world, shining against the black. It looked gentle, almost fragile compared to the iron beasts of the Council. But Rian knew appearances were lies. He had seen the records, the reports. Humans had fought, wars that shook entire systems. They had destroyed enemies much stronger than themselves. They were called reckless, unpredictable, dangerous. And now those same humans had opened their arms to the exiles. The question was why? On the horizon, Commander Ellis walked the decks with his officers. The exiles watched the humans closely. Every move, every word, every action. Trust was a fire too small to see yet. But suspicion was as big as the void. Ellis knew this. He did not push. He did not demand. Instead, he simply said, "You are safe now." But to the exiles, those words were too heavy, too impossible. One night, in the refugee hold, a fight broke out. Two alien men shouted, one claiming the humans had poisoned the food. The other argued they had been saved, not poisoned. The crowd grew restless. Voices rising in panic. Rian himself had to arrive, shouting until silence returned. He held up the ration bar in his hand. He ate it in front of them, slow and steady. "See," he said, his voice cold. "They are feeding us, not killing us." The silence that followed was uneasy. Trust did not grow in a single bite. But fear weakened, even if only for a moment. Still, Ryan could not rest. He had lived too long with betrayal to simply believe. He called his officers together. "We will accept their help but never lower our guard," he told them. "If the humans betray us, we will fight until our last breath." The officers nodded, weary but loyal. They had been broken but not destroyed. And deep inside, part of Ryan's heart whispered a truth he dared not say. That maybe, just maybe, the humans were sincere. Far, away beyond the blue glow of Earth, the Galactic Council stirred. Reports had reached them of Earth's defiance. They knew humanity had taken in the cursed exiles, and to the Council, this was rebellion. Earth has broken the law of the stars, one elder hissed. They shelter those who should be left to die. Another growled. The chamber echoed with outrage. But beneath the fury was fear, because if humans could unite the broken, the unwanted, then Earth's power would not just be military, it would be moral, and that terrified the Council more than fleets or weapons. On Earth's orbit, the exiles saw the human defenses. Stations gleamed with lights, patrol fleets circled like watchful hawks. Human warships were not as massive as the Council's, but there was a sharpness to them, a design built for survival. Every exile watching whispered the same thought. These humans are not weak. Children laughed again for the first time in months. They played with small trinkets given by human soldiers, simple toys but treasures beyond measure. Some of the mothers cried softly at the sight because joy had been gone for so long that it felt like a dream. But even as they smiled, the shadow of doubt lingered. Would this kindness last? Or was it only the calm before betrayal? One evening, Ryan was called to the human ship's command deck. Commander Ellis stood waiting, a star map glowing behind him. He pointed to the Council's territory. They know what we have done. They will come for you, and for us, Ellis said. Ryan's heart sank. He had feared this from the moment. The humans answered, he asked quietly. Will you still protect us then when they demand you hand us over? Ellis met his gaze, unflinching. We do not break promises, he replied. Simple words, yet they struck like thunder, because no one in the galaxy had ever said that to them before. When Rion returned to his ship, he stared at the faces of his people. Thin, tired, broken, yet alive. He thought of the human officer's words, and for the first time, he let himself imagine it. That maybe there was a place where they could belong. But shadows of distrust still wrapped around his mind. Because hope was dangerous, hope could kill more painfully than hunger. The exile fleet slept uneasy, some dreaming of betrayal, some daring to dream of peace. Above them, human ships kept watch, engines burning in the dark, and far away, the Council prepared its judgment. The storm was coming, but no one knew yet whether Earth's promise would hold, or whether it would break under the weight of the galaxy. The Council's wrath. The Galactic Council gathered in their grand chamber. It was a place of polished stone and glowing crystals, towering pillars that reached like claws into the sky. But inside, the air was heavy with anger. News had spread. Across the stars like wildfire, Earth had defied the decree. Earth had taken in the cursed exiles, and to the Council, this was an insult they could not ignore. High Elder Sarath slammed his staff against the floor. His voice boomed. The humans dare to challenge the will of the galaxy. Others shouted in agreement, voices overlapping like thunder. They have broken the code of unity. One counselor growled. They must be punished, cried another. Fear crept through the chamber even as rage burned. Because deep down, the Council remembered something that made their bones shiver. Humans did not scare easily. For centuries, the Council had laughed at Earth, called them reckless, unstable, violent. Yet every time the humans were underestimated, they clawed their way back stronger. They survived wars that should have destroyed them. They built ships from scraps and turned them into weapons. And now, they had done something no other world dared. They had offered shelter to the unwanted. That act alone was dangerous because it gave hope, and hope could spread faster than fear. In secret, the Council debated the truth. If humans could become the champions of the broken, if Earth could unite the outcasts of the galaxy, then the Council's power would weaken, not from battle, but from shame. They could not allow that. And so the decision was made. Earth would be given one chance, surrender the exiles, or face destruction. Far across the stars, on Earth's orbit, the message arrived. The transmission burned with authority. This is the Galactic Council, the voice said. cold and sharp. You have violated the decree. You shelter those who are cursed, those who must not live among us. You will surrender them to us immediately, or Earth will face the wrath of the galaxy. On the horizon's bridge, Commander Ellis listened, in silence. Around him, officers clenched their fists. Everyone knew what this meant. The council was not bluffing. They would bring fleets, fire, and ruin. The exiles, crowded in their broken ships, heard the broadcast too. Fear spread once more. Some cried that Earth would abandon them. Others whispered that this was the end. Rion himself stood frozen, his mind racing. Would the humans hand them over to save themselves? Was this kindness only a mask? But the answer came quickly. Ellis gave the order. Send reply. He looked at the screen, his face calm, his voice steady. This is Earth Command, he said. We do not surrender those who seek our protection. The room went silent. The transmission ended. Every exile who heard it trembled, because those words were more than defiance. They were a promise, and no world in the galaxy had ever dared to speak them before. Back on the Council's world, fury erupted. The humans spit on our laws, Serath roared. Then they will burn with the exiles they protect. Another hissed. Orders were given. Fleets were mobilized. Hundreds of warships began their march across the stars. The Council would not just punish Earth. They would make an example to remind every world what happened to those who broke the order of the galaxy. But even as the fleets moved, whispers spread across other systems. Some small colonies spoke quietly. They gave them food. They gave them water. Others muttered, why did the Council never do the same? For the first time, cracks appeared in the Council's mask. Their power was still vast, but the humans had planted a seed, and that seed was growing. On Earth, preparations began. Factories roared as weapons were forged. Massive carriers left dry docks, bristling with guns. Every soldier knew what was coming. Every family whispered prayers. But not one voice suggested handing over the exiles, because on Earth, the promise had already been made, and humans were known for many things, but breaking promises was not one of them. Rion watched from his ship, his eyes burning with disbelief. The humans could have betrayed them so easily. With one transmission they could have saved themselves, but instead they had chosen war. For strangers, for outcasts, for the cursed. His chest ached as he whispered, why would they risk everything for us? The answer came not in words but in action. He saw the human fleets forming walls of steel around the exile ships, as if saying, to reach them you must first go through us. The void darkened as the Council's armada approached, thousands of ships glowing with deadly light, their shadows stretched across the stars. The galaxy itself seemed to tremble, but in that moment, humanity stood firm, small compared to the Council's might, but unbroken, unyielding, and ready to face the wrath of the galaxy. Humanity's stand. The skies above Earth were no longer calm. War drums echoed across space, carried not by sound but by the glow of engines and weapons charging. The Galactic Council's fleets drew closer, endless lines of ships stretching like a wall of fire across the stars. But in Earth's orbit, humanity was not afraid. They had known this moment would come. They had prepared for it. Factories across the planet blazed through the night. Steel and fire turned into weapons. Engines roared as new ships lifted into the sky. Soldiers marched, pilots strapped into cockpits. Families stood on the ground, watching with silent pride. Every heart beat with the same rhythm. Every voice whispered the same promise. We will not surrender. On the horizon, Commander Ellis gathered his officers. Maps of the enemy fleet glowed before them. The numbers were overwhelming. The Council's armada was 10 times larger, their ships heavier, their weapons older but tested. Any other world would have bowed. Any other world would have handed over the exiles. But Earth had already made its choice. Ellis spoke firmly. We do not fight for conquest. We fight for our word. And humanity does not break its word. Tree. Exile fleet floated silently behind Earth's defenses. Their hulls were broken, their weapons useless. They could only watch, trembling. Some still believed the humans would abandon them at the last moment. Others began to whisper that maybe, just maybe, the humans meant what they said. Captain Ryan stood at the window of his flagship. He watched Earth's ships moving into formation, walls of steel and fire forming around his people. His throat tightened as he realized the truth. The humans were not preparing to use them. They were preparing to die for them. The Council's first message arrived. Earth, this is your last. Warning, the voice thundered. Hand over the exiles or face annihilation. Ellis gave the reply without hesitation. This is Earth Command, he said. Your threats do not move us. Your fleets do not scare us. We will protect those who came to us for refuge. The channel went silent, but every officer on the horizon knew what that silence meant. The Council had chosen war across the galaxy. Other worlds watched. Many laughed, saying humanity was foolish. Others whispered with awe, for no world had ever stood against the Council for the sake of strangers, and yet Earth had, and now the galaxy would see what that meant. The exiled children pressed their faces against the windows of their ships. They saw human warships surrounding them, each vessel glowing with deadly energy. The sight filled them with wonder. Some whispered, "They are protecting us." And for the first time in their lives, they believed they were worth saving. In the human fleet, captains gave their final orders. Weapons charged, shields raised, every crew prepared to face the storm. One young pilot whispered into his comm, "For Earth, for humanity, for the promise." His squadron echoed him, voices steady even as fear pressed against their hearts. There was no turning back now. They would fight even if it meant the end. The void shivered as the Council's armada arrived, thousands of ships glowing red like a tide of fire. They moved in silence, confident in their size, certain that Earth would break before their might. But they did not understand what humanity truly was. They did not understand the fire that burned inside every human heart. Ellis stood on the bridge, staring at the enemy wall. His officers looked to him, waiting. He raised his hand and spoke the words that would echo across history. Hold the line. Humanity's fleets shifted into tighter formation. Every gun aimed, every shield locked, the Council sent one final broadcast. You will fall. Ellis whispered back. Try us. The first blast cut through the void. The war had begun. Flames of battle spread across the stars. The Council's fleet surged forward like a storm. Earth's defenses met them head-on. The night sky above the blue planet lit with fire brighter than the sun. On the exile ships, the people clung to each other. Every explosion shook their hulls, every flash of light blinded their eyes, but through the terror, they saw humanity standing firm. Not one human ship abandoned its place. Not one broke the line. They fought not for land, not for conquest. They fought for a promise. And that promise was worth dying for. Captain Ryan pressed his hand against the glass. Tears burned his eyes as he whispered, They fight for us. For us, the cursed, the unwanted. In that moment, he understood something the Council never had, that humanity's strength was not just in weapons or ships. It was in loyalty. It was in keeping a promise even when the cost was death. The stars burned with fire. The void shook with thunder, and the galaxy held its breath. Because against all odds, Earth had not bent, Earth had not broken. Earth was standing, and the Council was finally learning what that meant. The battle for refuge. The first clash shook the void. Human ships fired in tight formations, their guns blazing with fury. The Council's armada answered with a storm of plasma and fire. Space itself became a sea of burning light. The exile fleet sat behind the wall of human steel. Trembling, every blast rattled their broken ships. Every explosion shook their hearts. But still the humans did not bend. On the horizon, Commander Ellis stood firm. Reports shouted across the bridge. Shields failing on the west flank. Another voice cried, "We've lost the carrier Aegis." But Ellis did not flinch. "Hold the line," he commanded, his voice steady as stone. And the humans obeyed. Every ship fought with the fury of survival. Every pilot burned with the fire of loyalty. They were outnumbered, outgunned, but not outwilled. The council commanders sneered in their chambers. They cannot last. They are fragile. They are reckless, they said. Yet the battle told another story. Every time a human ship fell, two more surged forward. Every time the line broke, it closed again with blood and steel. The humans fought not for themselves alone. They fought for the exiles behind them, and that gave them strength no council fleet could understand. On the exile flagship, Captain Ryan gripped the rail. His heart pounded as he watched humanity bleed for them. He turned to his people, his voice shaking with emotion. "Look at them," he cried. "They fight not because they must, but because they promised." The exiles stared in awe. For the first time they saw a race that chose sacrifice over safety. It broke something inside them, the belief that they were cursed, unworthy of protection. The humans were proving otherwise with every drop of blood. In the lower decks of the Horizon, human medics rushed through smoke-filled corridors. They treated the wounded with hands steady and hearts unbroken. One young soldier whispered through bloodied lips, Don't let them take the exiles." The medic gripped his hand and replied, "They won't, not while we breathe." The soldier smiled faintly and closed his eyes. Even in death, he had given everything for strangers. The council armada pressed harder. Massive dreadnoughts unleashed storms of firepower. Human ships shattered one by one, but still the defense held. On Earth, the people watched the skies blaze. Every screen broadcast the battle. Every family saw the sacrifice being made above, and every heart whispered the same words: "We will not fall." Then, something shifted. The humans revealed weapons the council had never seen. Railguns that tore through dreadnought armor, missiles that danced between shields like ghosts, and most terrifying of all, human pilots who turned their small fighters into daggers of light, sacrificing themselves to tear holes in the council's wall. The galaxy had called them reckless, but now they saw that recklessness was another name for courage. The exiles cried as they watched. Children clung to their mothers, whispering, "They are fighting for us." Old ones wept openly. Ryan himself bowed his head. Never in his life had he imagined such loyalty. The humans had nothing to gain. No treasure, no territory, no power. And yet they gave everything. For people the galaxy had thrown away on the council's command deck. Panic began to rise. Reports came in of fleets broken, ships burning. "They fight like beasts, they do not know fear," one commander shouted. Elder Serath's face twisted with rage. "They will drown in blood, crush them all." But even as he raged, doubt crept into his heart, because the humans were not breaking, and the longer they held, the more the galaxy watched. Whispers spread across neutral worlds. They are defending the cursed. They are standing against the council itself. And slowly, respect began to grow for once. The galaxy did not laugh at Earth. For once, the galaxy began to fear them. Back on the horizon, alarms blared. The ship shook violently as plasma tore through its hull. Ellis grabbed the railing, blood running down his forehead, but his voice remained calm. "Keep fighting," he ordered. "Even if I fall, you will keep fighting," his crew answered with one voice. "Yes, sir." The exiled children stared through the windows. They saw human ships burning, human lives ending, and yet the line still held. The humans refused to give them up. It was more than protection. It was defiance. It was love in its fiercest form. As the battle raged on, Captain Ryan whispered to himself, "If they survive this, then no power in the galaxy will ever stop them." The fire of war lit the sky, and though the outcome was uncertain, one truth had already been written: humanity would rather burn than break its promise. A home at last. The battle burned across the stars for hours. Human ships bled fire into the void, but still they stood. The Council's armada, mighty and endless, began to break under the storm. For every human ship that fell, another struck back with fury. For every scream of loss, there was a roar of defiance. The exiles watched, trembling, unable to believe what they were seeing. Finally, the council's lines faltered. Their dreadnoughts cracked. Their cruisers fled into the dark. One by one, the mighty armada pulled away. The council had come with wrath, certain of victory, but they left with silence, beaten not only by human weapons, but by something greater, by human will. When the last council ship vanished into the void, the battlefield was littered with burning wrecks. Humanity had lost much. Ships broken, soldiers gone, names that would never return home. But the line had held. The promise had been kept. The exiles were still alive, and Earth had not bent. On the horizon, Commander Ellis stood on a ruined bridge, his uniform torn, blood staining his face. Yet his voice was steady as he spoke. "Send word to Earth," he said. "Tell them we still stand." Cheers rose across every human ship, even through pain, even through loss. They had stood against the galaxy, and they had not fallen on. The exile flagship, Captain Rion sank to his knees. Tears streamed down his face. He looked at the wreckage, at the human ships still circling them like shields, and he whispered, "Why? Why would they give so much for us?" His second-in-command answered softly, "Because they saw us as people, not as curses." Those words broke something inside Rion, the walls he had built, the distrust that had chained him. He wept openly. His people wept with him, and in their hearts, they knew a truth they had never known before. They were not alone. Days later, the exile fleet entered Earth's orbit. The blue planet glowed below them, a jewel against the black. For so long they had been denied a home. Planets had closed their gates, stations had turned them away. But Earth did not. Earth welcomed them. As the first exile ships descended, the people pressed against the windows. They saw green fields, blue oceans, white clouds. Children gasped. Their eyes wide. Mothers wept. Fathers clutched their hands. They had dreamed of this for years. And now, because of humanity, that dream had become real. On the landing grounds, humans waited. They did not carry weapons. They carried food, blankets, and open hands. The exiles stepped onto the soil of Earth. For a moment they hesitated, but when a human child ran forward and hugged an exiled child, the hesitation broke. The crowd erupted in tears and laughter. The galaxy had cast them out. But here, on this small world, they had been given something greater than refuge. They had been given family. Captain Rion walked beside Commander Ellis across the field. He looked at the humans around him, smiling, welcoming, giving. He whispered, "We do not deserve this." Ellis turned to him and replied, "No one deserves kindness. It is given." Rion bowed his head, unable to speak. For the first time in his life, he felt truly safe. Far away, the council raged in silence. They had failed to break Earth, and their failure was seen across the stars. Whispers grew on distant worlds. If humans protect the cursed, maybe they will protect us too. Seeds of rebellion began to stir. But on Earth, none of that mattered, because the exiles finally had what they needed most: a home. That night, under the skies of Earth, the exiles gathered with humans. Fires burned. Food was shared. Laughter filled the air. Children played together. No longer divided by fear, Rion stood among them, his heart heavy with gratitude. He looked at Ellis and said, "The galaxy cast us out, but humanity gave us life again." Ellis placed a hand on his shoulder, "And now, you are one of us." The stars above still shone with cold light. The void beyond still held danger and war. But for the exiles, the nightmare was over. They had been cursed, hunted, abandoned. But Earth had stood for them. Earth had fought for them, and Earth had given them more than survival. Earth had given them a future. For the first time, the exiles no longer feared the galaxy, because now they had a home, and that home was called humanity.